What's going on, you guys? I hope you're having a great day today. Today I'm going to show you how to maintain and make sure your vehicle stays on the road. This is my 97 Toyota 4Runner. She's my baby. She's got me everywhere I needed to go. Done all the work myself, and I've been able to get her to 400,000 miles, 402,000 miles, you can see there. Now, I am not the original vehicle owner of this vehicle. However, I bought this car when it had 312,000 miles, if I remember correctly. Yeah, let me just show you underneath the hood a couple items you want to keep maintaining just to keep your vehicle on the road. Pop open the hood. I apologize for the awkward angles and whatnot. I have to video with my phone because it's all I got. But this is the first video of my channel. Welcome. Now, number one item for sure, definitely your engine oil. That's what keeps everything lubricated inside your engine. Make sure nothing seizes or gets locked up. You can always look for a dipstick. It's either usually going to be yellow or orange in color. This little cap right here. This is mine. Pull it out. And you're kind of looking for the brown stuff right there. You want to make sure it's in between the lines. You also want to make sure your vehicle is flat. Mine's at the bottom of that bottom bulb right there. You want to make sure they're in between the two bulbs. But since my vehicle isn't flat because I have a lift kit on the front of it, it's going to be a little low. So the oil's fine. You also want to make sure it's not dark in color, because that means that it's due for an oil change. Basically, you want to change your oil every around 3,000 to 5,000 miles or so, depending on the age of your car. If you have an older vehicle like this, it's older than if you have a vehicle older than, say, probably 3-4 years old, you definitely want to change it a little more often just to make sure that the engine gets the lubrication that it needs. A lot of these manufacturers nowadays say that these cars can go 10,000 miles plus on an oil change, and I just don't believe in that. Just with a lot of stuff that I've seen, being a mechanic for a few years that I've been. But the most I would recommend if you have like a brand new car I would probably say go at most 7,500 miles on your oil change. And yeah, that's another thing. You definitely want to make sure you have coolant. Now, some of you will have a cap on your radiator like this one, and some of you will have a tank. You always want to make sure that either your tank or your radiator is filled to the max with coolant. Coolant is the vital fluid inside your engine. It's what keeps everything cool. Make sure nothing overheats, nothing melts, and just make sure everything at the proper operating temperature. This is more of like an overflow tank for me, so if there's too much coolant in here, it'll bypass it over to here, and then if it needs it for whatever reason, it'll suck it back into the radiator. So for me, I can just pop this open. Always make sure, and before you pop this open, always make sure your engine is cool. Otherwise, this will pop off with a bunch of pressure, and it will burn you with third-degree burns from the hot fluid. It is not fun. I can promise you that. It's very hot and very painful. Basically, all you're looking for is you just want to make sure that the coolant's over the fins. As you can see there, mine is red, and you can see it's over the fins. That's just really all you're looking for. You want to make sure it's got a nice coloration to it. It's clear. It's not got chunks in it. It doesn't have any it's not like a opaque or looks like a milkshake almost, because then that could mean you have a problem with your head gaskets, which is a main source, or it's a main gasket that basically seals your coolant from your cylinders, basically at the head down in here. Go ahead and close that up. Another thing you definitely want to make sure you do service a lot is your air filter. It's going to be in a box similar to this one. Basically, for this one, you just pop these two tabs. The air filter's right there. I have an aftermarket filter, so mine's going to be a little bit different than yours probably. Yours is probably going to be a paper style filter, which is going to be white. This one is called a K&N filter. It's a little bit higher flowing. It helps the engine breathe a little bit better. Basically, you can take this out. It just slides out or pops out, depending on the kind of car you have. all you're looking for is like, you're looking for dirt, dust, debris, any sort of that kind of stuff in between the fins here. You can see this filter is a little dirty, but it's nothing to be concerned about. I'm not really concerned about this much dirt. I will like, this is a cleanable filter, so you can get it out with an aerosol and clean it. I'm not terribly concerned with this filter. This filter actually looks pretty decent considering for what I do. Go ahead and close that up. You definitely want to change that probably around every 20,000-30,000 miles or so. You just kind of got to check on it, just depending on how much you drive on dirt roads and whatnot. Coolant, you want to make sure you change that every 100,000 miles or so. Same thing with the coolant hoses here. This is the intake, and then the output is down in here, right there. Brake fluid, kind of important, just a little bit. Kind of need brake fluid in order to stop, otherwise you're going to get into a pretty nasty wreck. You always want to make sure, it's at the near or at the top of where the maximum is, not above, because then it can cause problems. But the max for me is right about there. I don't know if you can see the line, but the line's right about there. And the minimum, you want to make sure it doesn't get below the minimum, because then there will be air in your brake lines and your brake pedal won't, it'll sink to the floor and you won't be able to have brake pressure, or as good of a brake pressure. You also want to make sure that you change this right around every, depending on what kind of car you have and how much driving you do, you want to change it about every 30,000 miles or so. Or you could just do what I do, and I just go by looks. You just look at it and it doesn't really look dark. This looks a little dark, but it's also in the shade. Another thing you could do is you could get test strips. You can find these at your local O'Reilly's or local Advanced Auto Parts, whatever. Basically, you dip it in there, and then you have a little sheet you can compare it to see if the brake fluid's bad or not. Another thing you want to check for is you can get it's like a similar to a hydrometer tester. Basically, you dip it in the brake fluid and it tests the conductivity of sorry. I live in an apartment complex, so I got a bunch of racers around here. So basically, you dip it in the brake fluid, and then it'll test the conductivity of it. Make sure it tests if there's water or not in it. If there's water in it, it brings down the boiling point. So when you press the brake pressure, your brake fluid would turn into air bubbles. Basically, it'll boil. And same concept with having the air in your brake lines. It's not good. You basically won't have any brakes at all. Spark plugs. These little doodads in here usually have wires like this coming to them, and they'll have like a top hat with them. If you pull this out, it'll be like this long thing in it, and then if you look on the side of it, it has like a metal tab or metal spring inside of it that makes contact with the spark plug that's down in there. Let's see if we can get a light. I don't know if you can see it down in there, but that little metal thing down in there, that's your spark plug. You want to change those depending on which one you have. Copper spark plugs you typically want to change around 15,000 to 20,000 miles. If you have iridiums, you could probably go 100,000 miles on them. Again, depending on how hard you drive, whether you're doing racing applications or whatnot. Yeah, it's just a spark plug basically is what ignites the fuel when it gets injected into the cylinder. So if your spark plugs aren't working, your engine will misfire, basically meaning that the gasoline is washing the oil out of the cylinders. So your cylinders are running dry. Basically that can mean it'll lock up your engine, which isn't good. Never a fun time. Another fluid you definitely want to check, power steering fluid. This one is a little wonky because the dipstick's not exactly made right on this car. So typically you want to see the fluid right at the cold symbol, which is right about there. When your engine's cold, if your engine's hot, you've been driving for a while, you want to make sure it's at the hot. So mine's at the hot. Like I said, this car is made a little weird, so you just want to make sure that it's nice, and you want to make sure the fluid's not discolored. Usually it's depending on the car, it's either going to be like a clear-ish color or a red. Mine is red because it uses transmission fluid. for the power steering. Not all of them do that, so don't put transmission fluid in it if it calls for something else. Always put what it calls for in it. Transmission. Some of them have a dipstick, some of them do not. I know I used to have a 2007 Camry that didn't have a dipstick, and basically you would run the engine for a minute and then pull the drain plug, and there was a straw. That was your quote-unquote dipstick. Kind of a stupid design if you ask me, but hey, whatever. This one, it's similar to your oil dipstick. You just pull it out. This one's gonna have 4 marks. It's gonna have 2 for a lower position for when your transmission is cold, and then 2 more for when your transmission is hot, right there. So same thing with this one. This one's a little weird. They didn't quite make this correctly, so this dipstick's not exactly right. But what they did do is they made a blow-off valve only for, as far as I know, only for these 4Runners. They made a blow-off valve, so if you do happen to put too much in it, it'll blow off the excess, so you really can't overfill the transmission in these 4Runners. But yes, you always want to make sure you're putting the right fluid and the right amount of fluid in there. Transmission fluid, you definitely want to change probably around 60,000 to every 100,000 miles. And yeah, just make sure you keep it up on that. Washer fluid, not a necessity, but definitely important when you're driving on the highway and you get either a bug splatter, or it's in the middle of winter time and you're getting all that slushy stuff kicked up under your windshield. Windshield fluid, you always want to make sure that you put windshield wiper fluid in here. If you live in, especially if you live in colder climates like Colorado or in the mountains, in the mountain area, you always want to make sure you put fluid that is rated for below freezing, so that it doesn't crack this tank and break it. Because if you put water in here and it gets below freezing, the water will expand when it freezes and it cracks this tank and breaks your tank, and then you got to buy a new tank. Same thing with the radiator. You always want to put coolant or antifreeze in here. 50-50 mix is what I would recommend. It's the easiest to put in. You don't have to do any measurements or anything. You just pour it into this cap or your tank or whatever. Always fill it up to the max. Never want to put water in here, because number one, if it freezes and it freezes inside your block, it can crack your block, which is not good, or it'll crack your radiator, which also isn't good. These are about 140 to 160 bucks, if not more. They're not cheap, and an engine nowadays is 5 to 7 grand, if not more. So you always want to make sure that you don't put water in here. If for whatever reason, say your coolant hose blows off and you need to put something in the radiator just to get you home, don't put tap water. Put distilled water if you can. Tap water has minerals in it, and it can rust out your engine block, rust out the metal parts in here. It'll rust out these fins that are down in here. This is for your condenser, but the fins, it's the same kind of concept. The fins down in there, it'll rust those out and break them really easily. So yeah, never put water in here unless, absolutely necessary. And yeah, that's pretty much it on the fluid changes. Air filter. Some cars have a cabin air filter, and some of them are located in here, so you have to take this off, which is just a couple plastic clips. Some of them have it underneath the glove box, so you take the glove box down, push in 2 tabs on both sides, and then pull it down, and then it'd be back in there. However, mine does not. Mine is too old for that. Another place you can look for to find out what your specifications are for when you need to do fluid changes are in your owner's manual. You can flip to the back. And yeah, it'll tell you it'll tell you how much you need. It's like, this is for oil change on my car. I have the 5VZ FE engine, and then if you're changing the filter, you want to put 5.2, or if you're changing it with the filter, you put 5.5. If you're leaving the old filter in, you put 5.2. And this manual basically gives you a whole bunch of information on different parts, specifications, and all that fun stuff, your manual is definitely useful for this kind of stuff. But yeah, you can look inside in your manual and it'll tell you just about anything you need. Cooling system, you know, tell you about that. If you have a manual transmission, it'll tell you what kind of fluid you need, you know, your battery, what kind of voltage you need, what is good, what is not. Tires, you know, tell you what kind of tire you need, tire pressure too. So it tells you here, it gives you the kPa, this, and then the PSI. So yeah, and then wheel torque, it'll tell you all of that. So basically your manual is definitely a go-to for when you're looking for specifications. You can also look at online too, but online can give you some false information. I would definitely recommend, if you have it, look through your owner's manual for your specifications. You'll get the best information out of it. Go ahead and put that back in there. And yeah, that's pretty much all the information you need as far as maintenance goes. Oh, never mind. Tires. Hey, tires are important. You always want to make sure your tires are inflated to the proper pressure. You can just get a gauge like this. You can buy these at Walmart for like 10 bucks. They're not that expensive. You can basically just come over here, you take your valve cap off, just screws off. And then you just kind of push it in there. You try to push it in there evenly as possible. My tires are inflated to around 32, 33 PSI. You can see right there, mine are good. And then you have this little, on this one you have this little bleed off valve, so you can bleed off pressure if you need to. You don't want to overinflate your tires too much, because that can cause your tires to wear a lot faster in the center right here. You also don't want to underinflate your tires either, because it will cause these shoulders or the outsides of your tire to wear faster. If you are having an issue with your tires wearing out on one side, like this side is like worn out completely, but this side has a ton of tread, then you have an alignment issue, which just means you'd have to take it to your local mechanic and ask them for alignment. And basically they adjust some parameters on the underside of the vehicle that changes how the vehicle, or how the tires point. And then you just kind of go back in here. Same thing with this one. It's just the same for all 4 tires. Just kind of push it on there as straight as it can. So you can see this one's a little low. Definitely need to inflate this one a little bit. But yeah, you just gotta make sure. Sorry, shaky camera. I'm trying to balance everything. And for sure, definitely one thing I will be doing is this channel is going to be for like kind of showing you how to work on your own car and try to keep it maintained, just kind of simple stuff. I don't know if I will be doing any like kind of bigger repairs, like anything involving taking the intake manifold off or anything like that. If I do, then I'll post a video about it. But yeah, other than that, there's not much else to it. Just kind of make sure your vehicle's maintained. If you have any questions from me, send them down in the comments below. I will get to you as soon as I can. And I will also be posting videos on off-roading. I tend to do a lot of off-roading, so I will definitely post videos on off-roading, like the gear you need, what you should bring, kind of like the rules on the off-roading and whatnot. And yeah, all right, y'all, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.